The old mahogany table seemed to mock me, its polished surface reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights of our family lawyer's conference room. I watched my mother's trembling hands clutch the official document, her eyes darting between the paper and my sister Emma, who sat with a calculated composure that made my stomach churn. Grandmother Eleanor had always been different. Where other grandparents might offer cookies and gentle hugs, she was a force of nature, sharp-witted, fiercely intelligent, and unapologetically direct. Our relationship was complicated. She saw something in me that others missed, a spark of potential that both excited and terrified her. "Alexandra," she would say, using my full name with a precision that demanded attention, "potential means nothing without strategic action." Those words echoed in my mind as I watched Emma's perfectly manicured fingers trace the edges of the inheritance documents. My sister had always been the golden child, blonde, charismatic, with an uncanny ability to manipulate our mother's emotions. I was the practical one, the observer, the strategist who never quite fit into the family's glossy narrative. The inheritance was substantial, nearly $3.2 million, including grandmother's entire investment portfolio, her lakeside property, and a collection of rare antique jewelry that had been in our family for generations. And somehow, through a series of carefully orchestrated conversations and emotional manipulation, Emma had managed to secure every single asset. I remembered the moments leading up to this: hushed phone calls, strategic visits to our mother in the weeks following grandmother's funeral, the calculated way Emma would drop hints about her financial struggles and future plans. Our mother, perpetually caught in Emma's emotional web, had never been able to see through her daughter's transparent tactics. "Mom," Emma had said during one of those conversations I'd overheard, "I'm thinking about starting a family soon. These investments would be so crucial for our future." Her voice was honey-sweet, designed to trigger our mother's deepest maternal instincts. And it worked. Perfectly. The lawyer cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "The assets have been transferred entirely to Emma Louise Richardson, as per the family's discussions and your mother's explicit instructions." I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a cold, calculating emptiness. This wasn't the first time Emma had been the favored child. Throughout our lives, she had always received the better opportunities, the more supportive interventions, the benefit of every doubt. When I needed help paying for my engineering degree, I was told to take out student loans. Emma? She received a fully funded MBA program courtesy of our parents. When I struggled with a startup, I was lectured about financial responsibility. Emma's failed business ventures were always cushioned by family investments and soft landings. This inheritance was just another chapter in a long-standing narrative of inequity. I caught Emma's eyes for a brief moment. There was no triumph there, just a calculated satisfaction, the look of someone who knew exactly what they were doing and felt no remorse. Little did she know, I was my grandmother's true protégé. And Eleanor had taught me well. Revenge is a dish best served with meticulous preparation. The local library's archive room became my sanctuary. Surrounded by dusty legal volumes and microfilm readers, I transformed into a forensic investigator of my own family's history. What began as a quest for financial justice quickly morphed into something far more complex. My first breakthrough came from an unexpected source: a yellowed copy of an old family trust document I discovered tucked between legal volumes. Something about the formatting seemed off. As an engineer with a keen eye for detail, I knew inconsistencies were never accidental. I reached out to a former law school classmate, Michael Rodriguez, who now worked in estate litigation. "These signatures," I said, spreading the documents across his conference room table, "they don't align with standard probate practices." Michael's eyebrows raised. "You're right. The witness signatures appear to be dated inconsistently." And this power of attorney amendment? He traced his finger along a barely perceptible erasure mark. This looks like it was modified after the original execution. My research expanded. I dove into grandmother Eleanor's personal history, not just the polished family narrative, but the raw, unfiltered truth. I discovered old bank statements, correspondence, and fragments of a story far more intricate than anyone had ever revealed. There was a property deed from 1985 that didn't match the family's oral history. A series of investment transactions that suggested grandmother had been far more financially strategic than anyone knew. Each document was a puzzle piece, slowly revealing a picture of calculated planning that predated Emma's recent manipulation. I learned that grandmother Eleanor had once been a corporate strategist, a woman who navigated male-dominated boardrooms in the 1960s and 70s. Her survival hadn't been about playing by the rules, but about understanding and strategically manipulating them. She didn't just leave an inheritance. I muttered to myself one late night, surrounded by spread-out documents. She left a test. The most shocking discovery was a sealed envelope I found in her personal safe deposit box, which I had legal right to access as a potential heir. Inside was a handwritten letter, dated just months before her death. The contents would change everything. My approach would require precision. I wasn't interested in an emotional outburst or a public confrontation. Like grandmother Eleanor had always taught me, true power comes from knowledge, preparation, and the strategic moment of revelation. I began compiling a dossier: bank statements, property, records, correspondence, legal documents with subtle inconsistencies, each piece of evidence carefully organized, cross-referenced, time-stamped. Emma thought she had won. She had no idea what was coming. Strategy was an art form I'd learned from grandmother Eleanor, and now I would paint my masterpiece of retribution. I chose attorney Rachel Kleinman carefully, a specialist in estate litigation with a reputation for discretion. She was known in legal circles for her surgical precision. Our first meeting was in a nondescript coffee shop downtown, away from potential prying eyes. "What I'm about to show you," I said, sliding an encrypted USB drive across the table, "requires absolute confidentiality." Rachel's eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned the documents with professional detachment. Her fingers moved methodically, cross-referencing digital files with printed records. After an hour of meticulous review, she looked up. "This is more than just a simple inheritance dispute," she said quietly. "This is a carefully constructed web of legal vulnerabilities." The document I was preparing wasn't just a weapon, it was a surgical instrument. Each piece of evidence was meticulously catalogued: inconsistent power of attorney signatures, suspicious property transfer records, financial transactions that suggested undue influence. The handwritten letter from grandmother Eleanor documented patterns of financial manipulation. I knew emotional outbursts would destroy my credibility. This had to be clinical, precise, devastating. Rachel helped me refine the document, ensuring every claim was bulletproof. "The goal," she advised, "is not to destroy, but to expose. Make it impossible to ignore, impossible to dismiss." We strategized the perfect moment of revelation, a family gathering where Emma would feel most secure, most confident, where the sudden exposure would have maximum psychological impact. My grandmother's words echoed in my mind. Power isn't about victory. It's about making your opponent understand the depth of their miscalculation. I was creating more than a document. I was crafting a moment of absolute truth. The final version was a masterpiece of legal and personal revelation, a document that would unravel everything Emma believed she had so carefully constructed. Grandmother Eleanor would have been proud. The annual Richardson family Christmas gathering had always been a carefully choreographed performance of false harmony. This year, I arrived with a different script. Our parents' lakeside home, the one grandmother Eleanor had originally purchased decades ago, was decorated in pristine white and silver. Garlands draped the mantelpiece, expensive china glimmered on the table, and the scent of roasted turkey mingled with forced pleasantries. Emma sat at the head of the table, resplendent in a designer burgundy dress, her diamond earrings catching the light. She was the picture of success, of victory. Her husband Marcus sat beside her, oblivious to the storm about to break. I waited. Patience was my weapon. "Before we start dinner," I said, my voice calm and clear, "I have something I'd like to discuss." The room went silent. My mother's hand froze mid-motion, a crystal wine glass suspended between the table and her lips. Emma's smile flickered, almost imperceptibly, but I caught it. I pulled out a folder, crisp, precise, each document carefully arranged. "This is about Grandmother Eleanor's true wishes," I began. Emma's laugh was sharp, defensive. "Alex, we've been through this. The inheritance was handled legally." Legally? I spread the first set of documents across the table. "Let's discuss what legal really means." The next 30 minutes were a surgical deconstruction of their carefully maintained facade. Each document was a scalpel, each revelation a precise cut. The property deed from 1985 that showed grandmother had intended the lakeside house to be split equally between us. The investment records revealing Emma had already been gifted over $500,000 in loans over the past decade. The handwritten letter, grandmother's final testament, that explicitly stated her desire for equal distribution. "You manipulated Mom," I said to Emma, my voice steady. "You created a narrative of financial need that was entirely fabricated." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. My mother's face had gone pale. "These are lies," Emma hissed, but the conviction was gone from her voice. I produced the next document: bank statements, investment records, emails, each piece of evidence meticulously time-stamped, cross-referenced. The most devastating revelation came from Grandmother Eleanor's own words. The letter, written just months before her death, detailed her disappointment in Emma's manipulations and her true intentions for the inheritance. "She knew," I said quietly. "She saw exactly what you were doing." Emma's carefully constructed world began to crumble. Her husband looked at her with new eyes, questioning, uncertain. My mother's hands trembled. "Is this true?" she whispered to Emma. The silence was deafening. Emma's defense crumbled layer by layer, her fabricated stories of financial struggle, her claims of being the responsible child, all dissolved under the weight of documented evidence. "You've been lying to us for years," my mother said, her voice breaking. The realization was a physical thing. You could almost see it spreading across her face. Marcus stood up. "I need to understand everything," he said to Emma, his tone demanding. The perfect Christmas gathering had become a tribunal, and I was the prosecutor, judge, and jury. Emma's world, built on manipulation, deceit, and calculated charm, was collapsing around her. Each document was a blow, each revelation a nail in the coffin of her carefully constructed lie. Grandmother Eleanor's final lesson was being delivered with brutal precision. This wasn't just about money. This was about truth. This was about justice. The room hung, suspended in a moment of absolute silence. But I wasn't finished. The most devastating document was yet to be revealed. "There's more," I said, pulling out a sealed envelope, the one I'd discovered in Grandmother Eleanor's safe deposit box. My mother's voice was barely a whisper. What could possibly be worse? The envelope contained a truth that would shatter everything we thought we knew about our family. As I began to read, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "This is a DNA test," I announced, conducted 6 months before Grandmother's death. Emma went ghost white. Marcus looked confused. The test revealed a shocking truth. Emma was not my father's biological daughter. She was the result of an affair my mother had conducted decades ago, a secret she had kept hidden from everyone, including Emma herself. The implications were staggering. The inheritance wasn't just about money, it was about identity, about belonging, about the very foundation of our family's existence. "The man you believe to be your father," I said, looking directly at Emma, "is not your biological father." Marcus stood up. "What are you saying?" The document detailed everything: the affair, the carefully maintained secret, the reason behind Grandmother Eleanor's complex estate planning, a mechanism designed to protect and expose the truth. My mother collapsed into her chair, decades of secrets suddenly rushing out like a broken dam. "I never meant," she started, then stopped. There were no words that could undo what had been done. Emma's manipulation suddenly took on a different context. Her entire life had been built on a foundation of deception, not just the inheritance, but her very identity. "Grandmother knew," I continued, my voice clinical, detached. "She discovered the truth years ago. Everything she did, every investment, every legal maneuver was designed to protect you, Emma, while also ensuring the truth would eventually come out." The irony was perfect. Emma's attempts to manipulate the inheritance had triggered the very mechanism designed to expose her true origins. Legal consequences were inevitable. The inheritance would need to be completely reassessed, property titles would be challenged, trusts would be invalidated. But the real destruction was emotional. Marcus was looking at Emma like a stranger. My mother was lost in a fog of decades-old guilt and fear. And Emma, the golden child, the manipulator, was completely broken. Grandmother Eleanor's final move was checkmate. "Why?" Emma finally whispered. "Why would you do this?" I thought of grandmother's words spoken to me years ago. "The truth is never a weapon, Alexandra. It's a light. Sometimes the brightest lights expose the darkest corners." This was her light. This was her legacy. The Richardson family would never be the same, and for the first time, I felt something close to peace. Justice, I realized, wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. Unfiltered, uncompromising, absolute. 6 months after that fateful Christmas gathering, our family had become a landscape of broken connections and tentative rebuilding. Legal proceedings consumed everything. Emma's carefully constructed financial empire began to crumble. The false inheritance claims, the manipulated documents. Each revelation brought new complications. Her husband Marcus filed for divorce, citing fraud and emotional manipulation. I found myself in an unexpected position. Grandmother Eleanor's true estate plan, now fully revealed, established a trust that would provide for both Emma and me. But it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about something far more profound. My mother sought therapy, wrestling with decades of guilt and secrecy. Our conversations were stilted, painful, attempts to rebuild trust on a foundation of shattered illusions. Emma disappeared. Rumors suggested she'd moved to another state, trying to rebuild her life away from the wreckage of her past. The confident, manipulative woman I once knew was gone, replaced by someone broken, searching for an identity she'd never truly known. I thought often about Grandmother Eleanor. Her plan had been more than a simple inheritance. It was a final lesson in truth, in justice, in the complex nature of family. "Inheritance isn't about money," she'd once told me. "It's about the stories we choose to tell and the truths we choose to protect." My engineering background had prepared me for systematic problem-solving, but nothing could have prepared me for the emotional complexity of unraveling our family's deepest secrets. Each document, each revelation was a precise calculation, but the human cost was immeasurable. The lakeside house, The one grandmother had originally purchased remained unsold. A symbol of our family's complicated history, it stood as a silent witness to our transformation. I didn't feel like a victor. Victory would have been too simple a word. What I felt was something more nuanced, a mixture of relief, sadness, and a strange sense of liberation. 1 year after that Christmas, I received a letter from Emma. It was brief, handwritten, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen from her before. "I don't expect forgiveness," she wrote. "I'm not sure I even understand who I am anymore." The letter didn't ask for anything. It was simply an acknowledgement of the truth, of the pain, of the irreparable damage. Family, I realized, was never about blood. It was about truth, about having the courage to see each other, truly see each other, even when the reflection was painful. Grandmother Eleanor's final inheritance wasn't money. It was a lesson in truth, in justice, in the complicated, messy beauty of human connection. And some inheritance, I understood now, could never be measured in dollars.